Hey everybody, my name's Eric, and over here is my sailboat Windsong. Today I'm going to show you guys a series of videos of the final work that I've completed on the bottom job of Windsong. I've previewed all the work in a few other videos a long time ago, and I'll link them down below. But this project is going to be a bit of a technical how-to video of how I've plugged up a few of the holes on the bottom of the boat with epoxy and fiberglass, and then I finally roll on the barrier coat, which is one of the last jobs that need to be done on the bottom at least before I can put the boat in the water. I still have a lot of work to do on the boat as a whole, but this is one of the biggest projects that I've had to do, that I started 5 years ago when I finally took the boat out of the water, and it's getting to a completion just now. So with all that said, I'm going to take you back a few weeks when I first started working on the bottom again, all the way up till now when I just finished up this barrier coat. Let's go. Okay, so the bottom for the most part has been completely faired down since I've ground off the entire gel coat. What I mean by that is this white up here is gel coat on top of fiberglass laminate. I've ground down through this white layer to this blue sub layer and all the way down to the bare fiberglass because I had massive blistering problems on the bottom of this boat. The one remaining blister that I'm gonna patch up today right here is pretty typical of most of them. You can see it's about, a little bit smaller than the size of my hand, but pretty big. And the blister actually went into the first layer of fiberglass here. This whole thing was a big just pocket of acidic juice that you had to drill a hole into, let the juice spray out. Hopefully it doesn't get on you because it's stinky, nasty stuff. And then I would just grind off this entire area of fiberglass and let it dry out. The boat's been on land for over 5 years now, so it's as dry as it will probably ever be. So I'm happy to report we're finally finishing this thing up. This blister, I left it open because you can see here I have this hole drilled through it, and that was just basically a drain hole for my bilge. The bilge goes all the way down to the bottom of the keel, and of course rainwater would collect there, particularly when I had the boat wide open with no windows or hatches and just a tarp and not much else. So water would get in here by the gallons, and I would have to pump it out with my wet vac or some other sort of pump. It became a pretty big pain in the butt. So once I got pretty good at fiberglass and epoxy work, I was pretty confident that I could just drill a hole in the bottom of the boat and let the water drain out. I wasn't exactly sure how thick the fiberglass is right here, so I drilled it a little too high. So I have a second hole on the very bottom of the keel. All right there. And that did the rest of the work. You can see here the bottom of the keel is the last remaining spot on the hull that needs to be faired down after it's been all ground. You can see here it's not even and smooth, it's sort of ridgy. I know the lighting's bad, but I'm doing the best I can. So this just needs to get faired down. This hole and that other hole need to get filled and glassed in. I'm gonna try some combinations of fiberglass and then just using epoxy and filler before I coat the entire bottom here with the fairing compound that you see here. And then tomorrow I'll come back and sand it all down and see if it needs any more coating of fairing compound. And then if that's the case, I'll try to get all that done and patched up by next weekend when I'm gonna have some buddies come into town and we're gonna try to roll on a few coats of barrier coat primer. All right, with that said, I think the first thing I need to do is open up this hole a little more so it has a big edge to be filled in and have more surface area for the epoxy to hold on to. I need to bevel off this, maybe actually I think I've already done that, but I'll do it anyways just to show you how I did it. Well, I've got, yep, I got a nick right there. I gotta smooth that out, so I'll at least get to video some grinding. And I need to do something similar to the hole in the bottom too. The rest of this is all pretty well prepped up. It will just start getting wet it out with epoxy and fairing compound. And I'm going to do a little searching around the rest of the boat to see if there's any last minute little dings that need to be filled up with fairing compound. Alright, so I think I'm going to open up this hole here with a countersink bit to give myself a bit more surface area. So working it around in there to get that hole nice and wide. Alright, so you can see now I've got a more tapered edge to fill up with more fill and give it better grip, other than that narrow hole that was just basically could be punched through. Now it's got a big wedge to fill in. And I'll kind of smooth this edge out and taper a little bit more with my grinder. So what I was doing here grinding this hole was this taper I made all around the little hole is meant to be, I'm going to fill in the hole directly with Cabosil mixed epoxy, and then this area around it I'm going to add a layer of fiberglass, biaxial fiberglass, so it's pretty thick. And then of course I'll fill in this entire blister area with another layer of fiberglass. And then the whole thing will get covered up with fairing compound. I'll probably even put a nice little layer of Cabosil on top of the, nah, probably won't. I'll just do 2 layers of fiberglass. See, last minute decisions. So the same thing under here. Yeah, I just made that depression so I can fill it up with a layer or 2. I'll probably do 2 layers of fiberglass here since it's on the bottom. And it didn't have that blister area around it to get that second layer of fiberglass, so I gouged this one a little bit deeper. So let's cut some fiberglass. So the next step for any epoxy or fiberglass work is to clean the whole surface area off of any dust or anything else, so that your epoxy will actually stick. Using acetone, nasty stuff, but highly effective. Don't breathe it in. Just wiping it down to get it nice and smooth with no dust to get up in that hole. Got some loose debris in there I need to clear off. I'm going to try to get this in there. Pretty clean. Let's try this one. Got a little debris in it. Nice and clean. So next we mix some epoxy, some just clear epoxy, and wet out the area so that the actual fiberglass itself absorbs some of that thin epoxy and creates a nice base. All right, let's go mix. So we've got all our epoxy supplies here ready to go. I use US Composites epoxy. They're a great brand. They have fantastic epoxy and fiberglass supplies, resins, glass, mat, tape, everything you need for any job, including polyurethane resins and fillers. They're based out of in the West Palm area of Florida. They're much cheaper than West System or anything you're going to find in a boating catalog, and they're just as high quality, sometimes if not better, if you ask me. I may be a little biased though, but anyways, I use their regular thin epoxy for all of my work, and then today I'll mostly be using the 2-to-1 hardener, which is the slow hardener. It has the longest pot life, because it's a hot day here in the summer of Florida. There is also a medium hardener, which I thought I brought, but of course I just didn't see it right, and I brought the fast hardener, which I'm going to get a little experimental with and use it, even though it's blazing hot out here. I'm going to use it to just quickly flash some epoxy to get it sticky quick enough to put these layers of fiberglass on. So let's see how that works. I guarantee you the remaining epoxy will start to combust, and that'll be pretty fun to watch. So let's go. See here, now the hole is all wetted out with epoxy, and all that laminate is soaking up that thin epoxy and creating a nice base tacky layer for us to spread our goop on and fill up with the fiberglass. So let's go mix our other resin and wet out the fiberglass. And open up the cabousel. Yes, now I'm getting epoxy on everything, but what's new? Alright, I've got this stupid little scooper cup. I want to use enough to get it nice and thick. Alright, so we've got it nice and peanut buttery, and it's ready to fill up those little holes. Let's go. So, got some of my spread here. I'm just gonna kind of get it up in that hole as best as I can. I don't want to shove too much of it in there because it'll create a big stalactite in my bilge. Stalagmite, whatever the proper word is. So I'm just gonna paste a little bit over this, clean up some of this excess. Sorry if the camera works really bad. Okay. Just get it smooth enough. I'm gonna actually fair this hole in a little bit. Ah, crud. Okay. With this stuff. A little bit more, and then we'll get the fiberglass on that. Okay. So I'm gonna run and get my first layer of fiberglass. Which I believe was this one. And apply it down. Just kind of work it in so it melts in with the cabousel and it's filling up the whole gap. You can see it's not completely faired, so I'm just going to add a little bit more cabousel. Oh yeah, now we're, oops, sorry. Nice and flat and ready for that next layer. I'm gonna do the bottom and get the fiberglass for it as well. Okay, so the outside of this has started to get tacked up. And I'm ready for the big layer. And I usually go matte side down. So if I was doing a lot of these, I'd have a roller, but it's hard to reuse those because epoxy dries no matter how well you think you cleaned it off. They eventually get too gooeyed up to use further. So yeah, this is nice and fair. It's pretty flush. So what's going to happen after this is this is going to dry up for a little while and tack, and I'm probably going to wipe a coat of clear slow hardener resin just to because I'm going to come back in this whole bottom edge of the keel. I'm going to roll on some clear resin and then fair it down, including these two patches. So that's what the bottom one looks like now, all filled up and glassed in. Alright, so this is getting dried up and nice and tacky, and so I'm going to start rolling on some clear epoxy on that and then the entire underside of the keel. So when this tacks up, we'll put on some fairing compound. Completely faired down the bottom of the keel with the epoxy fairing putty. And what I'll do is I'll let it cure overnight, and tomorrow I'll come sand it all down and get it all flush. But particularly in these repair areas, there's going to need to be an extra round of fairing. You know, where the glass is, I need to bevel down those edges and then probably give it another smear of fairing compound. But that's pretty solid and fixed up whole now. And you can see the rest of the keel fully faired down. I end up just kind of smearing it around with my hands in some spots around these corners where the spatula doesn't, or squeegee doesn't do as well. But once this is dry, it'll get a nice sanding and one more touch-up round of fairing wherever needed, and then the bottom will be done and ready for the primer. Alright, so it's the next morning. We're back here at the boatyard, and all of my fairing compound is pretty much all dry and cure. Some of the areas I used the slow cure on it's cured, but you can tell it has a little ways to go. But it's hard enough to sand, so I believe today I'm going to try to sand down this whole first layer of fairing compound and get it all as smooth as I can. And areas such as this where we made the glass patches, we'll probably need an extra round of fairing compound after I sand it all down. So without further ado, I'm going to gear up, put on my long johns and all my safety gear and get grinding. Alright, so you can see here at the first pass of sanding, I've got it for the most part pretty flush. You can see here this dark spot, that's a low spot in the fairing compound, kind of right in the middle of that hole I ground down. So for the most part, this is all really well flat. I'll just have to fill up this area with a little bit more fairing compound and sand it down once again. There's a lot more work to do, so let's get sanding. In our children's sea, no one So you can sort of see here now it's really smooth underneath. Let's see if I could find or patch right here. If you can see it is where that hole was, and it's nice and flush. You can see here I've got a little spot I got a fair in, but other than that spot and that one on the big hole, we're pretty flush. But this is just about 6 feet of the keel. I got a long ways to go, so off to work. I've spent much of the day sanding down the fairing job I did on the bottom of the keel. It's all nice and flush now. I identified a few spots that needed some follow-up work for fairing. For example, of course, that one patch we did, I told you I found that low spot, so I just smeared a bunch of fairing compound on it and I let it cure, and come by sometime this week to sand it down along with some of these other spots to get it all ready for next weekend's barrier coat. I also did some just random checking of the rest of the hull. Found a few other little spots that needed some repair work, just minor dings that I've just not noticed before, and gave the full thing a once over, sanding with 60 grit paper. Some of it I know was sanded with 80 grit, and I kind of wanted to have it a little bit lower than that to grip the barrier coat. So with all that said, I think I'm ready to head out for the day and find some water. I'm back here a few days later after this is dried up, and I've had the chance to come back, and now our repair is completely flush, all faired down. You can see the glass is pretty strong and everything. Got that low spot all filled in, and we're good to go. No more hole in the bottom of the boat. Some of you who know what you're doing when it comes to epoxy may be saying, well, Eric, those holes you filled in, you should have beveled them out 12 to 1 to a 12 to 1 ratio to the depth of the hole, and use many layers of fiberglass to build it up. And I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I did just that with these holes that were right here. You can see right there is a through hole in the head, and there was another one right here and right here, somewhere in there. All this fairing compound is covering up fiberglass that I made huge bevels for, because those holes were, you know, 1 inch plus wide each, so it made sense to use some serious glass on those. But the holes I filled on the other side, they were only about 1/4 inch drill holes, and I felt comfortable using Cavasil to kind of make the initial plug, especially with all the grinding I did to bevel that one out. The Cavasil combined with 2 layers of biaxial, which is 4 layers of matte and cloth alternating, I think did the job well. Thanks for watching these videos. I know it was a bit more of a technical one than some of you might care for, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. I'll try to film more of these in the near future. If you like them, subscribe to this channel, check out the blog. All the links will be down below, and I'll see you guys soon.